Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk-On, PFF's college football show. I'm your host, Max Chadwick, alongside my co-host, Dalton Wasserman. Kind of a massive episode, Dalton, before conference championship weekend. We're going to go over a lot of the head coach hirings and firings that just went down recently. We're also going to cover the path for every single one of the, let's say, 8 contenders for the college football playoffs. So if this team wins, if this team loses, who gets into the Final Four? So the path for every single one of the 8 contenders remaining. We're going to put on our tinfoil hats and go through all the scenarios, basically, for each team to get into the Final Four. And then finally, at the end, we're doing a little mini preview, not the big preview that we usually do on Wednesday. That will be all the Power 5 conference championship games. That'll be on Wednesday's show. On this show, a little mini preview for all the Group of 5 conference championship games. We did the UTSA Tulane game last week. It was our first Group of 5 game that we did basically all season. We're going to do all 5 Group of 5 conference championship games because they matter a lot, and there are some massive implications for them for obviously the New Year's Six Bowls as well. So ultimately, Dalton, this is a loaded show that we had after a unbelievable Saturday of college football. I don't know about you, man, but I think that might have been the best Saturday we've got all year.
You took it right out of my mouth. It was the best Saturday of the year. That was the Saturday we've been waiting for. We got the best for last, and it sets up the dream scenario of what are basically a bunch of pseudo playoff games going into conference championship week. Just unreal games in Louisville, at Auburn, even Florida State, Florida was wildly entertaining. Just an unbelievable Saturday after a Friday that actually went pretty routine with Oregon and Texas, really getting big wins. But Washington, I can't forget Washington. Washington State was classic. Michael Penix couldn't even watch the ending. Just an unreal Saturday that's going to lead into another unreal Saturday with huge matchups that we've been honestly waiting like 2 months for. It's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, and that in I want to mention the Oklahoma State BYU game too, man. That game was incredible.
Classic.
Oh my God. And that had huge implications too, because if Oklahoma State lost that game, Oklahoma would have gone to the Big 12 title game, and BYU would have made a bowl game as well. So huge implications in that game too. Yeah, crazy Saturday. Obviously, the Hail Mary for Alabama was the headliner, which was unbelievable. I think on the 10th anniversary, too, of the kick six. So it's kind of insane that Alabama gets their, it's not as insane as a kick six, obviously, but their kind of version of the Hail Mary play against Auburn. Unreal. I said it before, man. Right after we recorded our preview last week, I almost regretted not previewing the Iron Bowl just because no matter how bad you think one of the teams might be, it always gets weird at the end, and it got weird this past weekend. But first off, before we get into the college football playoff and everything that happened over this past weekend and how it sets up a huge weekend of the college for the conference championship Saturday, we got to talk about the head coach firings and hirings that we saw this past week, because now it is officially silly season in college football, where a lot of schools are moving on from coaches, and not only that, they're moving on from them and hiring them at the same time. And the biggest job, in my opinion, that was open on the market was Texas A&M, who fired Jimbo Fisher. Now they just hired Mike Elko, Duke's head coach, former Texas A&M defensive coordinator, as their new head coach. Dalton, what'd you make of this move?
I think it was the right hire. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and I didn't think they needed to go and just get the biggest name for the sake of doing it. They already did it once. There was a lot of talk about Dan Lanning and Dan Campbell and Deion Sanders and a bunch of outrageous names. I think this was the exact right hire they needed to make. He's familiar with the program. He was their defensive coordinator. And I told you, what they need in that program is a high level of execution. And when you watch Duke football, especially on defense, to be honest with you, they execute at such a high level. And to go into a Duke program that was really struggling, he had 3 wins the year before he got there, 9 last year, 7 this year with a ton of injuries. Obviously, Riley Leonard at quarterback, kind of struggling on offense, and still found their way to a winning record. They execute at a high level. He's familiar with the program. I think if it's not the flashiest hire, and some people will probably still go, well, who's this Elko guy? No. This guy is a great football coach. He's hard-nosed. They need a coach that can take their talent, because they do have a ton of talent, and execute. Right? Even this past game against LSU, they probably should have won this game. They were ahead early. They had time of possession like crazy. They were ahead of LSU. They were the better team early on. And you've got now a coach who who really gets his teams to execute at a high level and to get him back into a place where he's familiar, as opposed to, we've talked about the money and the program and the resources. Somebody, I think, familiar with that to know how to handle all that
Yeah.
is a really, really good hire. I think this was the exact right hire they needed to make.
Absolutely. And, you needed a guy that, again, familiar with the program, so he understands that NIL is a massive part of that program right now because it has some of the best, let's say, deepest pockets in the country. So you could use it to your advantage, which Jimbo Fisher did very well. And also Mike Elko, of course, probably helped him out in that aspect as well. So he's very familiar with that. He's willing to take advantage of those resources. And you took the words right out of my mouth, man. You needed a good football coach because Texas A&M, look at the talent on this team, just purely off of how these guys were rated at coming out of high school, which I know is a very hit or miss thing. But still, usually some of the best teams in college football have the highest rated recruits coming out of high school. You look at Alabama and Georgia and how much they dominate in recruiting and how they're dominating on the gridiron. Ohio State the same way. Texas A&M is fourth in that in terms of how good their roster is, in terms of how they were rated coming out of high school. So there is talent on this roster, but you said it, the execution just wasn't there. Now you get a guy like Mike Elko. You keep that recruiting up. You maybe hit the transfer portal a little hard too and get some great players in the transfer portal. I mean, like I said, the sky's the limit for Texas A&M, and I think this is the right hire. This is a guy who I expected to be the head coach. I know Mark Stoops, the Kentucky coach, was rumored to be the coach. And then in a span of like a few hours, I feel like after all A&M fans revolted over it, they announced that he wasn't going to be the head coach. But I would have been cool with that hire too. I think he's a really good head coach for Kentucky. That Kentucky program was in the dumpster before he got there, and he's turned it around and made it a respectable program in the SEC, which is saying a lot for a basketball school like Kentucky. But instead, you still coach from another basketball school in Duke and Mike Elko, who has done a phenomenal job. I mean, you said it. They went 3-9 before he got there. The year before that, they were 2-9. So the last 2 years, they were some of the worst Power 5 teams in the country. Now they turn into a really good Power 5 team immediately with basically the same roster there as well. It wasn't like a Mike Norvell thing where he kind of changed the roster through the transfer portal. No, Elko just took what he had and won with it, man. So I really like this hire a lot for Texas A&M. We'll get into more. I think we're going to do a grading every hire episode later on during the offseason, but I really like this hire, man. It's one of my favorites of the cycle. Maybe my favorite, though, of the cycle was this next one, Dalton. Michigan State hiring Oregon State head coach Jonathan Smith as their new head coach. What do you make of this move for the Spartans?
It's another. I'm with you. I think it's A+. I think when we went over this is another one a few weeks ago when I was looking at the list of names for this job. That one jumped out at me, and I think the biggest thing is obviously you want a coach who's had success and won, at a big program. Oregon State in the Pac-12, and now the Pac-12 is gone. It's officially gone after this Friday, right?
Yep.
But I think what Jonathan Smith, more than anything, and the way that Oregon State plays, right? They get in the eye and they get behind those tight ends and they run the football and it feels Michigan State's always had that identity, right? When they were really good, I think about even back to the days with Kirk Cousins, man. They get in the eye and they run the ball and they go play action and they go 3-step drop and kind of it's old school, but I think they really need to get back to their identity. They've tried to mix it up the last couple of years, get into a spread offense. Look, it's hard. It's in that area of the country, it's hard to play that wide open football like that between the cold weather and just Michigan State. It's just always how they've been. They've won games in the trenches. And I think Jonathan Smith wants to do exactly that. If you can take a team with big guys like they have at Michigan State, get their offensive line at the elite level like they were at Oregon State, I think you're really talking now, because you see it. We see it this year. And now that Ohio State wasn't as wide open this year as they usually are, you got Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. That is Midwest, big, gritty football, trench played football where games, you just saw it in the Ohio State-Michigan game, man. Brutal, defensive, hard-hitting football. Michigan State needs to get back to that. They tried to open it up. Obviously, some other things happen, and the entire thing's kind of a mess now. But I think Jonathan Smith can bring them, if he brings that same brand of football that he's had at Oregon State, he can bring them that physical identity back that gets them back into just being able to hit with those teams. Because right now, like you watch them play those other teams, I mean, against Penn State on Friday, they just couldn't even stay on. They were getting just put on the sled. And it's hard against those three teams in that division if you're not physical enough to play with them to have any chance.
Yeah, and you look at Oregon State offensively, at least, has the most physical offense in the country, and with that offensive line they have there, like you mentioned, the run game they have too. That's what Michigan State was at its best, man. That's what Michigan State they made a playoff playing that kind of football a few years ago. So I think it's a great hire for them. It makes a lot of sense. This is one of the top candidates I would have wanted for them. It also makes sense for Jonathan Smith. It sucks because he was the golden boy in Oregon State, obviously the former quarterback there, his alma mater. He was never going to get fired at Oregon State. But unfortunately for him, man, you look at Oregon State and where their standing is right now, they weren't going to be in a very advantageous spot with the Pac-12 obviously crumbling and Oregon State being one of the two schools, the other being Washington State, without a home, really. So it makes sense for him to want to jump ship after this year. Now, of course, the Oregon State program, who had a great year this year, I still might be a top 25 team when the new college football playoff rankings come out. But man, they're going to get ravaged by the transfer portal now. A lot of guys are going to be leaving in the portal, and this program might really take a downturn. So sucks for them. It really does suck with everything that's happened to Oregon State in terms of really rebuilding this program under Jonathan Smith, and then kind of getting screwed out of the Pac-12. Now Jonathan Smith leaves basically because of that, and you're probably going to lose a lot of players as well. So it sucks for them. But it makes sense for Michigan State to hire this kind of coach, a culture-building head coach like Jonathan Smith. And it makes sense for Jonathan Smith too, man, to take a job like Michigan State and go to a premier conference that Oregon State simply doesn't have right now in the Pac-2 that they have with Washington State. So A+ hire, I think, for Michigan State, and it makes sense for Jonathan Smith to go to that kind of job as well. Another one that we saw was Mississippi State made a hire, and an offensive coordinator, not a former head coach, offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby, Oklahoma's offensive coordinator, now Mississippi State's head coach. So they're kind of getting more to offensive brand of football that they had under the late Mike Leach. Kind of got away from it this year, obviously under Zach Arnett, but seems now, Dalton, they're really trying to recommit themselves to kind of the air raid offense approach that they had under Mike Leach.
Yeah, you said it absolutely right. They needed a jolt in this offense. You could just tell they changed it coming into the year, and Will Rogers never looked comfortable, and it looked stale. It looked like it was a team that was built one way, and they were trying to use another way. And Jeff Lebby, I figured they were going to hire someone like this: Kirby Moore, Ben Arbuckle. Jeff Lebby obviously is the one they hire. Somebody like that who can spread things out, get this back to being a high-flying, fun offense. Because defensively, look, they can play defensively. They're really physical. They've got draft picks coming out off the defense every year, but they need the offense to match that level of energy. And when you watch them this year, there really just wasn't there wasn't a whole lot, especially in the passing game. It just going to a drop back kind of straight drop play action kind of system. It just didn't suit their football team. I think they have more talent offensively than they showed this year, but schematically they just were not. It's a big change to go from a system like Mike Leach's to kind of the more, I don't know, just conventional system that they went to. I mean, everything from the timing to the cadence and just even the routes themselves, just everything about it just looked like it looked like the players were uncomfortable. And you really don't want that, especially out of your offense. Now, Lebby runs things in a very simple manner, but incredibly fast and preferably balanced. It's not like the running game is going to go away. There will still be a little more running game than there used to be under Leach, but the tempo and the spread elements of that offense is more similar than what they were doing this year. And I think obviously they got to recycle some talent in there. I believe is Will Rogers a senior? Is he done there?
No, he's actually in the transfer portal. I don't know if you saw that.
He's in the portal. I did not see that. Well, he'll go in there, but Jeff Lebby's proven he can score points, man. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's a first round talent on that entire Oklahoma offense, and they're still put up 69 points. Was it on TCU on Friday?
Yeah,
68 or 69. This guy, when he's running an offense and they get the tempo rolling, it can avalanche on you in a hurry. I think it's 3 for 3 here on the hires. I think this was the exact thing. They needed a jolt in their offense. They have plenty of defensive talent to keep themselves in games. They need points. They need to find points, especially in this side of the SEC and with Texas. And now, funny enough, Oklahoma coming in now. We'll see Jeff Lebby versus Oklahoma right away. But no, this was right. They needed a jolt on offense, and I think Lebby's going to give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, Mississippi State this year, 113th in AP per play in the country. Oklahoma, fourth in the country in AP per play, right behind LSU number one, Oregon number two, Georgia number three, and Oklahoma number four, man. So Oklahoma's offense, like you mentioned, not a very talented one, not a lot of superstar talent like you saw on LSU and Georgia and Oregon, but still, man, one of the most efficient in the country regardless. Dylan Gabriel, actually the third highest graded quarterback in the country this season now, with kind of the tear he's been on. So I agree with you. I love this hire. I think it's a great hire for Mississippi State. You kind of get back to that air raid approach, get back to that offensive first approach. Obviously, defensive coordinator hire is going to be huge there, but same time, man, this is a great hire. Jeff Lebby, former Lane Kiffin offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, which is pretty interesting. And Lane was actually poking fun of him at Twitter a little bit because now they're arch rivals. The Egg Bowl between those two schools actually a lot closer this year than I anticipated it being. But yeah, man, it should be a lot of fun in Mississippi State. I think it's a great hire for Mississippi State as well for Jeff Lebby. Like I said, one of the top OCs in the country, in my opinion. And now he gets a major SEC job. I think is very well deserved, honestly. Last one happened kind of a couple of weeks ago, but we never really got to talk about it because of scheduling and covering a lot of huge games. But Northwestern filled their vacancy. Now they didn't go out and hire anyone, Dalton. They went and promoted their interim head coach David Braun to their permanent head coach, and I think you and I both agree this is a very, very well deserved promotion for David Braun.
Yeah, it's the right move. I mean, I got to be honest. I thought coming into the year with all the circumstances and even just the dearth of talent that we thought they had, that they would only win maybe one or two games. And for him to come out with a winning season, won their last three games, played Iowa to a 10-7 ball game at Wrigley, just a tough, hard-nosed. I mean, another tough, hard-nosed Big Ten West football team. That's what they are, honestly. But a winning record is a winning record, and under the circumstances, look, winning records at Northwestern are rare anyway. And I think this year we didn't think it was coming. You could really argue that Braun should get like National Coach of the Year votes, honestly, for the turnaround there, because things were really on the downswing anyway on the field. But no, this is the right move when you, especially at a school like that, that's like heavy academic and it's very hard. There's a lot of things that are tilted against them when it comes to trying to just have success on a football field. Plus, they're trying to, I forget if it's either get a new stadium or heavy renovations to their stadium. They're in a real transition point, and to have stability now like this, coming off a year like this, is big time. This is the right move, and especially if it's a guy the players believe in, I don't see any reason to go external with this after the year that they've had.
Oh, absolutely not, man. I mean, listen, I got to look at their preseason win total after obviously the whole scandal that went down there and everything. But I mean, it must have been like 2 or 3 games, man. The fact that they're 7-5 this year and making a bowl game, like that's insane. That's an incredible season for Northwestern.
I covered, I believe it was their first game of the year against Rutgers, and it was, and Rutgers is now a solid football team too, but it was ugly. I really I was week 1, but watching that day, I really thought they were in for a long year, and to turn it around the way they have is really impressive.
Incredibly impressive, man. So yeah, great job by Northwestern. Honestly, I thought they're going to be the worst Power 5 team or one of the worst heading into the season. Even just strictly on the field, it didn't look pretty. It's not like this whole scandal rocked everything for them. On the field, even before the scandal happened, it didn't look good. And then the scandal happened. You go, oh man, they just fired Pat Fitzgerald. What is this going to look like on an interim coach all season? They're 7-5. I mean, they're like a good, at least an average college football team right now. That's a really, really good mark for that program. And like you said before, it's not like this is a Texas A&M type job where you can attract a huge name. It's a tough place to win, man. You mentioned the academics there, how the standards for academics are so high that it makes it very difficult in recruiting and a lot of other ways as well. I'm sure, they're not really doing well in NIL or anything like that either. So it's a tough place to win. Yet David Braun did just that this year, man. So kudos to him. Very well-deserved promotion. And now he's their permanent head coach now after serving as the interim coach for the entire season. So those are all kind of the hires that we saw recently. I'm sure by the time we post this, there will be more that come out. But let's take a look now, Dalton, at the current openings in the Power 5. So right now, Houston just fired their coach, Dana Holgerson. They have an opening. Oregon State now has an opening after Jonathan Smith obviously left for Michigan State. Same thing for Duke. Mike Elko leaves them for Texas A&M, so they have an opening. My beloved Syracuse Orange, my alma mater themselves, they have an opening after firing Dino Babers, and Indiana has an opening after firing Tom Allen. So of those 5 openings in the Power 5 right now, Dalton, which one to you seems the most intriguing?
I want to. I'll tell you what I want to see. I want to see at Houston down there in the Big 12. Let's get Cliff Kingsbury back in the Big 12, back down at Houston. All that work he did with Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech and Baker Mayfield, and I know he's like now the pariah in Arizona for everything with the Cardinals, but he got that team to the playoffs too. Everybody forgets that. A team that 2 years prior was the worst team in football. Got him at least to the playoffs with Kyler Murray and company, mostly with the offense carrying the show. So I would love to see Cliff Kingsbury bring it back to the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. Houston, I believe they won 4 games this year. Was it 4 or 5?
I think it was 4.
Let's get him back down there and get another great offense going in the Big 12, man. Just wide open. We got Colorado coming in. We got Utah coming in. Arizona coming in. My goodness. I mean, what the run they're on right now and the way their offense and Jed Fish is rolling, I would like to see Cliff Kingsbury make the Big 12, even with the 2 big teams leaving as high flying as ever.
That would be so much fun. I think Cliff Kingsbury would be honestly a great hire for Houston right now. I got to talk about my Syracuse Orange. Obviously, my alma mater, Dino Babers was let go after, I think, 8 seasons at the helm for the Orange. And now they're looking at a ton of names for their head coach. And one of them that I really, really wanted and I thought could actually happen because he was apparently on campus and in an interview was Dan Mullen, the former Florida head coach who spent the last, I think, 2 seasons now in a studio. And it didn't happen. He tweeted out actually late last night that he will not be Syracuse's head coach. So now the rumors are that Syracuse is looking at Bob Chesney, who is the Holy Cross head coach, who's doing a good job with that program. But again, for me, I just don't think you take a chance on an FCS coach, man. I think you need someone proven. You need someone that is a good group of 5 at least coach. Jamie Chadwell has been linked to the job at some points. Willie Fritz has been linked as well, the Tulane head coach. I don't know if he should take that job, but I would be over the moon with it as well. And then another name that actually came out that I wouldn't love either, but it's emerging as a favorite is Fran Brown, who is the Georgia defensive backs coach. And he actually is one of the top recruiters both at Georgia and Rutgers. And obviously Syracuse very much struggles in recruiting because I'll tell you from firsthand experience, it's not a very fun place to live in Syracuse, New York. The weather there is not very kind at all. NIL at Syracuse is way behind as well. Again, this is not an easy place to go and coach, man. This is not an easy job to take over. But Fran Brown has been kind of the name that's been floating around in there. Again, I think that's a huge jump to go from a position coach, even for a team like Georgia, a position coach to a Power 5 head coach. Big jump. I just wouldn't love that either. But right now it seems like Bob Chesney. I've heard Fran Brown, as well. But man, I would go after one of the top group of 5 head coaches, man.
Question.
Go ahead.
Question for you. Is there, I don't know how available he is, but how would you feel about New Mexico State's Jerry Kill, who used to coach at Minnesota?
I would take it. He did a great job there. I would take that.
And he's doing a great job this year because New Mexico State, I know, was struggling. We're going to get to them in a minute, but 8-3 this year in the Conference USA title game. I'm not sure that he would leave or how available he is, but I'm curious. That feels like, doesn't Syracuse feel like a similar environment to when he was at Minnesota? Yeah. Kind of a similar, like up north, kind of low key, but like could have some success here if we build it right.
That'd be great. Yeah, that would be great. I think. Again, like I said, I think now that Dan Mullen's out, it seemed to be him between him and Bob Chesney. Now I'm hearing Fran Brown is being linked as well. I wouldn't love Chesney or Fran Brown right now, man. You got to nail this coach. You can't set your program back even further by taking a chance on an FCS head coach who honestly, he's a good, not amazing FCS coach. Like he's never made it past the quarterfinals in the FCS. He also is number 24 in the FCS, I believe, right now this year with a 7-4 record. It's like, man, I don't know if I want to take a chance on a guy like that. I understand the regional ties are all there, and I understand you just paid Dino Babers a huge buyout and you want to go cheap. which is why you might get a guy like Bob Chesney. But man, I would love it as well. So Kurt Signetti from James Madison, I love Jason Candle from Toledo, who's been linked there as well. Jamie Chadwell from Liberty, I'd love. John Summerall from Troy, if they want to go that route too, I'd love that. But it seems like everything I've heard, at least, it seems like it's going to be down between Bob Chesney, the Holy Cross head coach, and Fran Brown, the Georgia defensive backs coach. All right, so those are all the head coach hirings and firings that we just cover. We'll cover obviously a lot more as a lot more schools fire and hire more head coaches. But Dalton, we got to talk about what we're about to get this conference championship weekend, which is insane. I can't remember the last time we had as many as 8 teams that were still alive for the college football playoff heading into the final weekend of conference championship weekend. I remember there's always like maybe 6 or maybe even 7 teams, but 8, man, it seems like a lot. I don't know about you, but man, this is going to be an unbelievable weekend of college football. And we're going to have a lot of scenarios that we have to go through and kind of put our tinfoil hats on and say, okay, what happens if this team loses and this team loses? Who gets in then? So this is a very fun segment. I think that should help out a lot of people who are kind of lost like we were before we really sat down and went through it. It's a very complicated thing to try to think about who the 4 teams actually will be when you go through basically every single scenario like we're about to right now.
Yeah, no. Well, so I think what we should do is preface this with 5 of the 8, we believe at least, certainly 4 of them are winning in, right? Mm-hmm. Georgia wins, they're set. That's if you're in the top 4, Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, you're undefeated. Your top 4 already should stay that way. Actually, Washington will move into the top 4 with Ohio State's loss. They'll be top 4 tomorrow. But those 4, plus probably Oregon if they avenge the Washington loss, right? That we're assuming. Like the committee, I'm sure the committee can't have any rooting interest, but man, I'm sure they're rooting for it to be kind of easy a little bit, because if you get the chaos here, it could get really, really chaotic and a lot of arguments breaking out. But you definitely, I think, to start it off with, you've got 5 teams: Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Oregon, who are winning in, right? And this is the good part about having all these head-to-head matchups: Georgia and Bama, Washington, Oregon, right, and Michigan, Ohio State last week. That makes it at least a little bit easier when it comes to the easy scenarios. The hard scenarios, when you start getting upsets, then start getting really hard. But I think that's the good place to start is the win and ins, and then think about, okay, what if, especially in the Georgia and Michigan games, what if? Because those are the two things that could throw everything into chaos.
So I think Eli's gonna make a full screen, I believe, for every team. So we're gonna go through team by team and just say, okay, winning in or win in, they need this, or if they lose, are they still alive in this? So I think we should start off with the Georgia Bulldogs, currently 12-0, playing Alabama in the SEC championship game. Obviously, like Dalton said, they are winning in. If they win, they're the number 1 team probably in the college football playoff rankings, and probably deservedly so. So we don't need to talk about that. We'll do the full preview, trust me, for that game on Wednesday, which will probably the biggest conference championship game that we're going to get in maybe a long time. It's going to be an unbelievable game. I cannot wait for that game. But what if Alabama wins, Dawn? What if Alabama wins? Do you think Georgia's out of it, or is there a scenario where the Bulldogs can still sneak in even after losing to Alabama?
This is hard. This is real hard, because what they're going to need is two of the 3 other like contenders. Let's just say, obviously, getting the Pac-12 champion, that's one.
Yep. Alabama's probably in, right?
That leaves you then. I would think Alabama would get in, with their 1 loss being to Texas, although you've got some wild card things going on there too, with Texas having beaten Bama. I think what you're getting at now is scenarios where Georgia might need a Florida State and or a Texas to lose their conference title game, just the way the numbers shake out. Because again, you've got Michigan, you've got a Pac-12 champ getting in for sure. Let's just say Michigan's beaten Iowa. Now we can get into those. We're getting into those scenarios, but let's say Michigan's obviously heavily favored over Iowa. That's 2 spots. Bama, I would think, with the Georgia wins, going to make a big jump there. And we kind of have some wild cards, especially with Texas and even Ohio State floating around. Georgia need 2 other teams to lose to get back in there.
Yeah. So I would say, the scenario, so obviously be Alabama, you're in. The scenario, though, if you lose, I agree with you. You need 2 of these 3 teams to lose. You need Michigan, Florida State, Texas. You need 2 of those 3 teams to lose, because if only one of those 3 teams lose, I think all three of them jump if they win. Michigan obviously being over Georgia. I think Florida State 13-0 would get in over Georgia, although we'll talk about that because there has been a lot of talk about Florida State not getting in at all, no matter what happens on Saturday, which I think is we'll get into. And then Texas, I think, would get in because you look at it, Texas beat Alabama, who just beat Georgia. So Texas, I think, 12-1 conference champ would get in over Georgia as well. So you're going to need two of those three teams to lose. I actually was having a debate with some of my coworkers today, Dalton, that they think Georgia's in regardless of what happens in their game. I don't agree with that, man. I think there's a world, and especially when you look at Georgia's schedule. I mean, I know they play some great teams down the stretch of the season, but it's not like they've had like an unbelievable schedule this year either. I do think there's a world where if they lose to Alabama, they get left out, man, because I think, like you said, Alabama would get in over them. Michigan would get in over them. Florida State, the winner of the Pac-12 game, would get in over them. Texas would get in over them. So you're going to need two of the three, and Michigan, Florida State, and Texas to lose in order for Georgia to still sneak in with a loss.
Here's your thing for me. I think, and this is where Texas to me becomes a wild card. Here's the argument for me, because I think overall the schedules are probably pretty similar-ish, right?
Yeah.
What's a better win? Georgia at home against Missouri or Texas at Bama?
Texas at Bama, easily.
Then Georgia would have a serious problem if they lost and Texas won.
Yeah.
Because I think that, and now Texas does have, I mean, Oklahoma's not a terrible loss. They're still in the top 15, I believe it is. Number 15 floating around there. And it's a rivalry thing, and they lost at the last second and all that. But you would just have an issue of, I think Missouri is about as good a win as you could. It's obviously they're number 9 right now. It's as good a win as you could have outside of these top 8. But I think having a win like Texas beating Bama, Michigan beating Ohio State, Washington beating Oregon, possibly twice, having a win inside of this group, I think is something that's going to get thought about pretty heavily. It's why it's why you have certain other teams here who have to win this week despite their record, because they don't have, even Oregon, to be honest with you, I don't think they have like a signature win. And Georgia I don't think has it. Now they absolutely blasted Ole Miss.
Yep.
They blasted Tennessee, although I wouldn't call that anywhere near signature. But they don't play around. That's all I can say if I'm Georgia, because I think there are a lot of scenarios here where they could end up number 5. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So just recap for Georgia: win and in, or if you lose, you're going to need two of these three teams to lose: Michigan, Florida State, Texas. You need two of them to lose in order to get in to the college football playoff with a loss. In our opinion, at least, we'll see what the committee does. But in our opinion, that's what it would take for Georgia to get in with the loss. Next up is Michigan. So Michigan obviously favored by, I think, 23 points over Iowa, is the biggest spread by far, honestly, in a conference championship game. So Michigan heavily favored over Iowa. They're 12-0. They just beat Ohio State. They win, they're in. And truthfully, I mean, you can make an argument for them to even be number 1 over Georgia, although I probably wouldn't do that. But obviously, they are winning in. What if Iowa does the unthinkable, Dalton? What if Iowa, with one of the worst offenses in the country, somehow beats Michigan and pulls off maybe the best upset of the entire season? Is Michigan screwed, or are they kind of in the same boat as Georgia where they could still get in with some help?
I think they're in a more precarious boat than Georgia. I think you're looking at a similar thing where they need a couple others to lose. Again, Florida State and Texas, being that they're playing outside of this bubble against Louisville and Oklahoma State, kind of the wild cards there. You probably need those two to lose, but you're also then talking about a Michigan team who beat Penn State in a reasonable game, beat Ohio State in a tight game, a very tight game, but then will have lost to Iowa, who has one of the worst offenses in the country. I mean, if they lose this game, it would be what, 9-6? I don't know what probably. It would be, to be honest with you. Right. So here's the problem. The fun one for me, for them, would be, what if it came down to, well, number 4 is Michigan or number 4 is Ohio State? Because the body of work, even with the loss head-to-head to Michigan, tells you Ohio State. They both beat Penn State. Ohio State went into Notre Dame and won, and their one loss was to Michigan at the Big House by like 30 yards, right? McCord under pressure. We talked about that. That's where the game was won, right? But the head-to-head is, do you weigh one game or do you weigh the whole season? Because if I weigh the whole season, I got to think about Ohio State.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then coming off a loss to Iowa, is decisively worse than a loss at Michigan, with a chance to win the game on the last drive. I don't. My assumption is just they would go, they beat them head to head, so give it to them. But I think it's a better argument if this came down to Michigan, Ohio State 4-5. There needs to be a lot of debate about this.
Dude,
a lot more than there actually would be, being that Michigan beat Ohio State.
I think, yes, I agree. But also I think that trumps it, especially because it was only 2 weeks ago at that point then. They beat Ohio State. It's not like we'll get into the Texas Alabama thing later on, which is a whole can of worms that we have to open up. But that was so early in the season that there's at least an argument like, they're a completely new team now. That game is so recently that you're like, man, it'd be tough for me to put in an 11-1 Ohio State over a 12-1 Michigan, even if they lose to Iowa. So I think I would still side with Michigan in that scenario. But in my opinion, though, if they lose to Iowa, you're in the same boat as Georgia, where you need 2 of these 3 teams to lose. You need Florida State to lose. You need Texas to lose. And instead of Georgia losing, you need Alabama to lose. You need Georgia to win that game. Because if Alabama...
I was just going to ask you, if Georgia and Michigan both lose,
Georgia gets in over
Georgia. You have to take Georgia. You have to.
Absolutely. So you need Georgia to win, because if Alabama wins, they obviously get in over Michigan if Michigan loses. And Georgia would also get in over Michigan. So you're going to need 2 of Florida State, Texas, and Alabama. Now, I do think this is a little more likely than the Georgia scenario, because Georgia, you need 2 of Michigan, Florida State, or Texas. Michigan, we mentioned it, favored by 23 over Iowa. Texas is favored by, I think, 14 over Oklahoma State. So that's not as likely. But for Michigan, you need Georgia to win. Georgia's favored by 5. Florida State's only favored by, I think, 3 right now over Louisville. So those are 2 at least that you think, okay, that might happen. Like I feel good about Georgia winning. I feel good about maybe Florida State tripping up against Louisville on a backup quarterback. So that seems a little more likely, in my opinion, for Michigan if they do lose this game. But man, it's tough, man. You need 2 of the 3 to lose in Florida State, Texas, and Alabama. So Florida State, Texas, and Alabama. Those are really the 3 teams that Michigan fans should be eyeing, because they do play the last conference championship game, really, besides, they're at the same time as ACC. But keep an eye on the SEC game. Keep an eye on the Big 12 game as well, because who knows? If chaos happens, you might need a little help, and that could come in those 2 games.
Absolutely. And I think especially those 2 you just mentioned, the Florida State and the Texas games, when they're going to be fun. You still have teams, we saw it last year with Kansas State winning the Big 12, right? And they didn't have playoff implications on a lot. These games are dangerous, man. Look, Louisville's still going to be game. I know what happened last week against Kentucky, but you still have Florida State with a backup quarterback who looked a little rattled in the swamp. Those 2 games are the reasons really this could get wild. Honestly. And I know obviously Bama and Georgia is going to be fun, but it's the 2 games outside the bubble that are still highly competitive games. And obviously we'll get into them Wednesday, but especially that Florida State game. And man, this is why this will be the next best Saturday, because you have so many. We're going to be on. I don't know if we've ever been on pins and needles with all 5 conference championship games.
No,
I'm pretty sure we haven't.
Never, dude. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't remember a time where every conference championship game, every Power 5 conference still has a playoff contender heading into conference championship Saturday. That's insane. I can't remember the last time we had that. I feel like there's always been at least one conference you go, okay, whoever wins that is going to the New Year's Six Bowl, sure, but like they're not making the playoff. That's not happening this year, man. So every single one of these games is huge. So Michigan, do you agree with me that it is Florida State, Texas, and Alabama? You need 2 of those 3 teams to lose if you lose to Iowa?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that's the difference, is they need a Georgia win, because they'll take Georgia over Michigan.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So move on to the next one. This one's actually is fun, because I think this creates, I think when I was putting this together, Dalton, this created the hardest, this put my mind in a pretzel basically between these 2 teams. So we'll talk about this one. Washington 12-0 right now, playing Oregon in the Pac-12 title game. Simple scenario. You beat Oregon, you're in. You're 13-0. You're making the Pac-12 championship game, you're in. Okay, if they lose, and they're fit, and right now they are underdogs by 9 points, Dalton. 9 points. Oregon is favored over Washington, even though Washington beat them earlier this season. So if the odds makers are correct, and if Washington goes down, can they make the playoff if absolute madness happens?
It would be some absolute madness. The way they've treated Washington so far, having them number 5 that entire time, and it's very possible they could walk in tomorrow number 4. I just don't. I don't really get what's been with the hate on them when they have.
Yeah.
If Texas at Bama is the best win of the year, I don't know why the win over Oregon isn't next or maybe even on top. So they're playing close games against rivals in conference games that know them. Okay, I get it, but like you compare them to what everything Oregon's done. Oh, first of all, I don't get this nonsense. 9-point underdogs. No, I'm not.
I know.
I'm not having this. I'll dig in more and we'll get into predictions later on. But they should not be darn near double digit underdogs. That's nonsense. I'm not about this. I'm over the disrespect with Washington, and we'll get into that later. But no, they would need real madness again. Florida State and Texas losing outside of kind of the bubble of these teams playing each other. It just narrows it down, right? It takes you down to 6, and we're not even really sure if Ohio State is in it or not. But they would need, so you get those 2 losing, and then probably an Alabama losing. Yeah. Let's just say the sure things happen in front of them, right? Let's say Georgia wins, Michigan wins, and if Oregon beats them, that's 3. Let's say that's your top 3. That leaves you with the rest. Now, if you get Florida State and Texas, and obviously now with Georgia, you're pretty much at that point down to Washington and Ohio State. Who is it? And I think it would be Washington at that point because you've got an Oregon team that they had to play twice that beat them. You go 1-1 is better than 0-1, and we can debate Michigan and Oregon and all this and that, but they were both extremely tight games that went down to the wire. I think I would still go Washington over Ohio State. And this is the disadvantage for Ohio State being the one team that's not playing is they don't get one more stamp, right? Of just being able to make one last statement like these other 7. So it would take basically everybody below them also to lose to be able to still work their way into number 4, probably behind Oregon at 3.
Yeah, so that's the whole conversation. So again, you lose, and also I think something that we didn't bring up, but I think might matter, and I don't know if it should matter, but it might matter to the committee, is how badly Oregon wins if Oregon wins that game. Because if Washington gets blown out by double digits, maybe they look at Ohio State, who lost by 6 to Michigan and beat Penn State and beat Notre Dame. When Washington, you look at their resume, besides the Oregon win, I mean, they haven't really been that great of teams like Penn State or Notre Dame. Then you might look at that and say, okay, Ohio State should go in over them. That might be the difference. It might be the difference of how badly do you lose? And if it's a close game, then maybe you can forgive that. And like you said, they beat Oregon already earlier in the season. So that could be forgiven. But that's the interesting conversation. That's the one I really struggled with, is what they do with Ohio State and what they do with Washington if Washington loses. And of course, you have Florida State has to lose. You need Texas to lose. And you need Alabama to lose. It's not 2 of the 3 like the other schools. It's all 3. You need all 3 of those teams to go down in order for Washington to still be in the conversation. Who knows if they even put them in? You need to be in the conversation with Ohio State because, like you mentioned, you have Michigan that's automatically in. You have Georgia automatically in. Oregon will be in over Washington. And then you have the conversation between Washington and Ohio State. I don't know where they side, man. So that's why you see it says possibly on it right now, because I truly don't know where the committee will go if Ohio State and Washington are the 2 left for that number 4 seed. So I agree with you. I think I probably would side with Washington, but I think it also might matter about how badly they do lose. If they get blown out by Oregon, I think the committee might go with Ohio State in that one. But if it's a close loss, maybe they go with the Huskies in that one. So that's the one where I really, really struggled with as to who will be that final team if chaos happens and everything happens like it should.
Agreed. Totally agree. Washington, I know other people eye test and doing whatever with this. They've shown me enough. I'll just be honest with you. I don't know. I think the defense gets way too much hate. I think playing in close games gets way too much hate. Look, Georgia was playing in close games too. They played a tight game. They didn't take the lead till 3 minutes left with Auburn. Michigan's been in 3 straight tight games. I mean, I don't know what it is Washington and to an extent our next team here have to do to get respect. But what they're 12-0, man, in what was honestly probably the best conference in college football this year. What more do you want?
Yeah, absolutely. So those 3, so Georgia, Michigan, Washington, winning in, obviously. But if they lose, there's a path. So those are 3 that if they lose, there's a path. The rest of the teams we're talking about, the other 5 teams, do not have a path if they lose. And the first one is Florida State, the other undefeated Power 5 team right now, 12-0 on the season. Simply put, Dalton, it's beat Louisville, and that's it. If you lose, they're not putting you in on a backup quarterback without Jordan Travis. There's no way that happens. So this one's maybe the simplest one out of all of them. It's just beat Louisville. That's the only thing you got to do, and you should make the college football playoff if you beat Louisville. Although I've seen a lot of people recently say Florida State doesn't deserve to be in the playoff on a backup quarterback, and to that I say awful. That's like one of the worst takes I've heard, man, honestly. Is an undefeated Power 5 champ absolutely needs to get into the college football playoff if they win, obviously, against Louisville on Saturday.
Yeah, no, and actually, it proves to me more that they should be in, because now you've got this thing. You saw it against Florida again. Second half, Florida State's like they might be the best team in the country in the second half of these games. If they could only play the second half, they might still win a national title. But no, it's nonsense. Don't give me eye test, ACC, whatever, all this, whatever. Look, they've done what they needed to do. They beat LSU. They went to Clemson and won. If they win the ACC, look, Louisville, I know what happened last week. It doesn't look like as good a win as it did a week ago, but they're still going to be somewhere in the teens in the rankings. So Kentucky was game. It's a rival. Everything happened the way it happened. They have to get in. They have to. If they win on Saturday, and for some reason next Sunday they don't put them in, I don't know how the rant would go next Monday for me. I'm going to be honest.
There would be riots in Tallahassee.
I would be so. I'm not even a Florida State fan, right? But I would be so irritated, so irritated coming in, because I've already said enough about the committee a few weeks ago about I don't know really what their criteria is sometimes for these rankings, especially the opening ones. If they win, if they beat Louisville and they leave them out, they will get torn to shreds. We will get people just be so glad that we're going to a 12-teamer, because it would be absolute nonsense. To me, winning these last 2 games without Travis would be even more proof that they need to be in. I don't care if you think they're going to go in against Georgia and lose 52-3. I don't care.
And maybe they will. Who cares?
Yeah, I don't care. And honestly, I mean, they'll go in and try to win, but like Florida State fans, anything that happens beyond this week, if they get there, is kind of cherry on top. Yep. Look, I get it. You won't win the whole thing without Jordan Travis. I get it. And even then, what is it, Cardale Jones? You get in these 1-game scenarios. Nobody thought TCU was beating Michigan last year either. Nope. So look, you get in 1-game scenarios, you get a couple of fumbles, you don't know what happens. And I'm telling you, and I'm going to go over it more later in the week, this Florida State defense is as good as any of these teams sitting here. This is not something that if for some reason they win and still get left out, I would not blame Tallahassee for burning the place down.
No,
it's like I'll just say that it's got to be the dumbest conversation being had right now.
I agree, dude. Agreed. There's so many people that I respect in the college football community that are saying it. I'm like, dude,
it's because the assumption is that they will go in and play Georgia and get wrecked. I don't care. They earned it. If you earned it, we've seen teams in the semifinals get wrecked before. We've seen it. I mean, look, they put in Cincinnati when they deserved it. They played Alabama, they got wrecked. I believe was there 1 year Michigan State got in and they just got teed off on in the. Look, if you make it there, you earned it, and whatever happens after that, you earned that as well. If that's a whooping, cool. If it's a trophy, cool.
Right.
But you cannot leave a team out based on, well, I think they're going to get wrecked. Well, I think you want me to be honest? I just straight up from what I've seen all year, I think if Texas plays Georgia, I don't think it'll be that different.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be. I'm pretty sure it won't be that different a result. You can't base this on what are their odds of winning? No, you base it on what they've done.
Yep.
Now, the problem is, again, this committee hasn't always based things on what they've done. I still don't know till right now why Oregon is number 6.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still on this. This is what they are actually the team out of these 8, all of them, without the signature win.
Mm-hmm.
So look, they don't always base things on what have been done. But if they do that to Florida State, again, I wouldn't blame. If I was Mike Norvell, I would just I'd burn the building down.
Livid.
I'd find wherever that's awful. That would just be it's easily the dumbest conversation. And I've said this all year. I think there were times this year where you could have argued them up to number 2. I think they've been not only undefeated, they've been one of the 4 best teams all season.
Mm-hmm.
You might not like how they play in the first quarter. That sucks. They're still great and they still win them all. What more do you want at the end of the day than they're undefeated with a shot to get in right now? I don't get it.
It would be such an abomination if Florida State is left out as a 13-0 ACC champion. Abomination, man. It would be awful.
It's not happening. It can't happen. If that happens, I will light it up on this show. I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, good. I will too, man. Because this whole conversation is so stupid that we're even having this conversation. In the playoffs history since 2014, an undefeated Power 5 champion has never been left out. In fact, the only time where a 1-loss Power 5 champion was left out was in that first season in 2014, and that was when the Big 12 did not have a conference title game. So Baylor and TCU both had 1 loss that year. They shared the conference title, and there wasn't a conference champion. So that was the only time a technically 1-loss Power 5 champion didn't get in. If Florida State is undefeated and gets left out, man, it's like, why even play the games then? Why even say, oh, well, this is where I think the 4 best teams, like the argument for Alabama last year was like, oh, Alabama's one of the 4 best teams. Like, okay, Alabama lost 2 games though. You can't lose 2 games and still get into the playoffs. So, Florida State absolutely mentioned it. I was going to mention Cardale Jones as well. That was a big argument against Ohio State when they won the Big Ten with only 1 loss that year was, okay, well, they have their 3rd string, not even backup quarterback, 3rd string quarterback. Braxton Miller, remember, hurt his shoulder in the preseason, out for the year. JT Barrett, I believe, broke his ankle in the last game of the season against Michigan, out for the year. So Cardale Jones goes into that Big Ten championship game, lights up Wisconsin. Then there's a lot of argument of, oh, does Ohio State belong in the playoff on a 3rd string quarterback? Really? They're going to get blown out. They go into the playoff. They beat Alabama. Then they beat Oregon, and they win the national championship on a 3rd string quarterback. I'm not saying Florida State can do that with Tate Rodemaker, but for you to say that they can't do it and leave them out entirely because of what you think would happen is nonsense, in my opinion.
I would much rather watch them lose by 30, deserving to be there, than just be left out. Absolutely. Yeah. So again, what you think a team is capable of is complete BS. Let them show what they're capable of. And if they're a 13-0 Power 5 champion, absolutely. I don't care if I'm their quarterback, Dalton. I can't even throw 20 yards. If I'm their quarterback and we're 13-0, we're going to the college football playoff. Okay. If you're the quarterback and they're 13-0, they're going to the college football playoff. If anyone is their quarterback and going 13-0, they're going to the college football playoff. So the fact that we're even talking about this is awful. And I think if Florida, and like you said, if they beat Louisville, still probably gonna be in the top 15 of the ranking this week. It's unfortunate, of course, as well, because I would have loved to talk about the Louisville scenario and how they could sneak into the college football playoff, which unfortunately won't happen anymore. But man, if they win and they beat Louisville, there's not even a conversation to be had. They are absolutely going to the college football playoff. Okay, so Florida State handled that. And let's also say this. This is the only undefeated team where if they lose, there isn't a path. There is no path for Florida State to get in with the loss, because then at least you can look at the Jordan Travis injury and go, okay, see, I told you so. So that's the only team where it's like, okay, they lose, they can't make it in, and they won't make it in if they lose. So it really is winning in for Florida State, and there's really no other scenario for them to make it. So that's for them. Next team that I think is also kind of in a win and in scenario without any other scenarios for a loss or anything like that is Oregon, who I think if they beat Washington in the Pac-12 title game, no matter what happens in the other conference title games, I think based off what the committee has done with Oregon and having it at number 6 all year, Dalton, I think Oregon's in a scenario right now where that Pac-12 title game on Friday night is basically a quarterfinal because whoever wins that game, I think, is pretty much locked into one of the Final Four spots. Yeah, I agree. This is the simplest one on the whole board, and Florida State's this simple too, just with whatever made up controversy. No, there's no controversy here with Oregon. But you got to avenge it. I mean, they've lost to Washington twice in a row. Obviously, tight games. This should not be a 9-point spread. That's the only thing I'm going to say about this. This is a toss. This is a coin flip game. It's a coin flip game, and it's going to be played in a dome and everything and under the lights and all that stuff. This is. I mean, you mentioned Georgia Bama being the game of the year. It might actually be this one. This is just you've got Penix, you've got Nix, you've got everything surrounding these two teams. It's just it's the simplest part of this that Oregon very well should get in with finally in the last week having the signature win if they win. And it's very straightforward, I think.
Not only that, it could be for the Heisman Trophy as well. Whoever wins this game might ultimately, and you and I think both think that Jane Daniels should be the Heisman winner, but the voters might actually go for whoever wins this game between Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix. So some huge stakes, not only in terms of getting to the college football playoff and winning the Pac-12 championship, but also what quarterback is taking home the Heisman Trophy could be determined in this game as well. So Oregon, like I said, 9-point favorites over Washington, and that probably has everything to do with how they've looked recently, both teams. Oregon has won their last 6 games by an average of 26 points. Washington's won their last 6 games by an average of 6.5 points. So Washington, of course, is playing close, but they're beating everyone. And I agree. I think the 9-point spread is kind of insane right now. So Oregon, they win, they're in. They don't need any help. Otherwise, they would get in with a win over Washington. If they lose, they're a 2-loss team, losing twice to Washington. There's no way Oregon would get in to the college football playoff. All right, so next team we're going to talk about is Alabama. This is an interesting one, man. They're 11-1. They've got Georgia in the SEC title game. I think that they might be in with a win, but I could also see some arguments for Texas to get in over Alabama and for other schools to get in over Alabama as well. So what do you think the scenario is for Alabama to get in with a win? Do you think they're in if they win, or do you think they need a little bit of help to ultimately get in?
I think a little. I think Texas is the big one. There's also some scenarios where you could see, like, let's say, I'm going to take just Michigan out of this Iowa thing. I'm not going to dig into all of that and all of it, but I'm going to between Florida State and Texas, and I think Texas is the really important one because if you get Michigan and Pac-12 and Florida State, I think what Bama doesn't want is an argument at number 4 between them and Texas. Yeah, it just again resume, Bama. Head-to-head, Texas, same problem as Michigan, Ohio State. I think the best road for them is a win and a Texas loss. Now, other circumstances could also help them, but I think that would be surefire. I think if they won and Texas lost, they'd be in for sure. I think if you had something like Texas win and Bama win and Florida State lost, you're arguing Texas versus Bama and maybe versus Ohio State, but I don't think so. You basically have this. Take all the rest of the schedules, call it roughly even, maybe not, whatever. Is a Georgia win enough to overcome a head-to-head loss with Texas? I think yes, because nobody's beaten Georgia in like 2.5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But that would be, I think, the most important one for me for Bama. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll just get in because they beat Georgia. But I think the surefire way would be if Texas lost. I think that's the biggest threat.
Wouldn't they? So I'm trying to do the math in my head. Wouldn't they get in though? If Florida State did lose, Alabama won, and Texas won, wouldn't Texas and Bama both get in? Because it would be Michigan, it would be Pac-12 winner, then it would be Texas and Alabama in whatever order, right?
Well, but then you're arguing then Georgia versus Texas. You got Ohio State mixed in there.
I think Texas and Bama
You think Texas gets in over Georgia?
Yeah. Texas beat Alabama and Alabama beat Georgia. I think that's the kind of a simple way for the committee to look at it.
I don't know that it's that simple.
Dude, I think Texas with the win.
I think it's another. You know what I think it is too? I think it's another one. How do they handle business against Oklahoma State too?
Yeah.
That's
a tough one. Yeah,
if I'm Alabama, let's stay with Bama for a second. If I'm Alabama, I want this as straightforward as possible. I want Texas out of there.
Yeah,
I want them out.
But
because if it comes down to Bama, I think Bama winning this game versus just about anybody else is going to get in. But the head-to-head, you know how they are with these things sometimes.
Right.
And the head-to-head is going to that's going to bother people still, even early in the year. Now, early in the year, we've seen this before, kind of helps. But that's what I think that's the most crucial part is Texas losing.
I will say say Florida State. So if we'll talk about the whole if everyone else wins, but if Florida State loses and you're arguing Georgia, Bama, Texas, and let's say Ohio State, even if you're arguing Texas versus Georgia, I think Bama jumps Georgia, though. Definitely. Like, you can't put in Georgia over Alabama.
Oh, no. Yeah. But you don't want like all of it muddled like that. Again, I think the biggest threat to it all is Texas, with Georgia hovering and Ohio State kind of hovering. But I think being that they did lose to Texas, I think to have it out of the way would be the easiest thing.
Yeah, definitely out of the way.
That would be surefire. If Bama wins and Texas loses, they are in. They are in.
1,000%. But if Texas wins and Bama wins and Florida State wins and Michigan wins, then that's the tough one. I think that's the hardest conversation.
That's the nonsense. That's just nonsense. It's all that's when I actually just go, we'll just make it 8 this year and let's just go, because
who would you if the committee said, Dalton, we talk about it for 5 hours, none of us can come to a conclusion, so we're going to come to you and you alone, and you're going to determine who gets in, Texas or Alabama, who would you go with in that scenario? Bama,
Alabama.
Yeah, so would I.
I just think they found it. The early weeks 1 through 4, Bama is a different animal than that. Yeah.
So would I. Yeah, I would just say, and it sucks because I really do value head to head, and it sucks that at Alabama too. It wasn't like it was in Austin. You beat them in Tuscaloosa, and convincingly so too. I think you beat them by 10 points. Yeah, I think I would still go with Alabama, which is unfortunate. But Alabama, I think the resume speaks for itself. Beating Georgia speaks for itself. They have to get in. I think if you beat Georgia, you got to play for a national championship, I think, in my opinion. So I agree. So beat Georgia. Dalton and I both think beating Georgia is enough, in our opinion. But we don't know what the committee will think. So beat Georgia. And if you want a little extra help, you need Texas or Florida State or Michigan to lose as well. So that one of those 3 teams would help you if you win. But I think you and I both think beating Georgia might be enough for them to leapfrog Texas, in my opinion.
Yeah, so. and I think if you're Texas here, we gotta get through these last 2 real quick. I think if you're Texas, obviously you have to win, must win. You can't have 2 losses, and I think your best scenario is Georgia winning and not making this a big 1-loss argument. Georgia, Michigan, Pac-12 winning. To me, the easiest road for Texas, they win and Florida State loses. I think you've got the easy slot into number 4, slide ahead of a Pac-12 team. Don't worry about Bama. And I think if they win their conference, a Texas versus Ohio State argument, I think is pretty easy. The extra win, Oklahoma State's a good team. Florida State lose, slot Texas in there at 4. Is that pretty straightforward? I know there's other scenarios, but the most likely one, I think, because I still don't think if Bama win, I think it's kind of has them in danger now of getting jumped by Bama, and I don't think Michigan's losing. I think a Texas win and a Florida State loss is best case scenario. That's the best case
scenario for them. Okay. So yeah, they need that, and then real quickly, so they need, I think, Michigan, Florida State, maybe Georgia. Maybe if Georgia goes down, maybe the committee sides with Texas for beating Alabama. But I think Michigan or Florida State, and Florida State obviously be the way more likely option. So yeah, Texas winning and Florida State losing. Texas needs to win, obviously, and I think they need help too. They can't get in with a win. They need one of those 3 teams to or one of those 2 teams probably to lose. Finally, Ohio State. Is there any scenario for the Buckeyes, or are they kind of dead in the water right now?
They need the favorites. They basically everybody between, I don't know, this is the wild card with them is where they'll be in the rankings. But if you get Texas 2 losses, Alabama 2 losses, Oregon 2 losses, implying that you have 3 undefeateds at the top, right?
Yep.
And then Florida State losing, then I think you have an Ohio State, Florida State argument, and I actually do think they would put Ohio State in there. But they need over Florida. Basically, all you would have left at that point is Florida State versus Ohio State as the two 1-loss teams remaining out of all of this. I think Ohio State would get in based on how they've already been treating Florida State, and Florida State, if they lose to Louisville, Ohio State lost to Michigan, and do it that way.
Yeah, so Ohio State needs Florida State, Texas, Alabama, and probably Oregon to lose in order to get in. So you need a lot of favorites to go down in that one. But yeah, that's what we got for our playoff kind of tinfoil hat in terms of who can get in with each loss. So those are the 8 teams that still have a chance, and that's what we think will happen and what their paths are. All right, before we let you guys go, we did our whole college football playoff, every scenario for it. Now, these games that we're about to talk about aren't going to affect the college football playoff, but they're still conference championship games. They're still going to affect a lot especially in terms of the New Year's Six bowls as well. We're going over every single group of 5 conference championship game, kind of give our quick predictions on them. Not a full-length preview like you get on Wednesday for the Power 5 championship games, but we still want to show the group of 5 conferences some love, Dalton. We didn't do that enough, I think, this season, and we want to show them some love here on this conference championship Saturday.
Oh yeah, it's look. I think people forget it's still really, really good football, man. These are talented kids. These are talented kids. There's some darn well coached teams. You got future NFL. You got future NFL players on these teams too, man. A lot of them. I mean, you see more and more the talent's getting spread out, especially through the portal and all that. And these are going to be some really good football games.
Absolutely. So we're going to go over all 5 of the group of 5 conference championship games today. And then obviously, like I said, on Wednesday, we'll go over the Power 5 games in much more detail in those games. But so the first one we're talking about for the group of 5 conference championship games is this one's on a Friday night game, is New Mexico State at Liberty. It's actually being played at Liberty in the Conference USA championship game. Obviously, Liberty 12-0 on the season right now. If they win this game, and probably if Tulane loses, they would be the group of 5 team in the New Year's Six Bowl. But right now, Liberty going for an undefeated season in Jamie Chadwell's first year as head coach, which is part of the reason why I wanted Syracuse to take a long look at him as their next head coach. But alas, man, there's still New Mexico State on the other side having an unreal year themselves. They just destroyed Auburn a couple weeks ago. And Auburn went down on the wire with Alabama and losing on a Hail Mary as well. So by proxy, New Mexico State is basically on the same level as Alabama is what I'm saying, Dalton.
Oh man, get them in the top 10, right? Get them in this playoff conversation. They're gonna have to beat an undefeated team. No, but no, these are 2 teams, especially the offenses, that are really fun to watch. And I think it starts obviously with Jamie Chadwell. Look, Liberty was already really good under Hugh Freeze, right? Had a ton of athletes, and what he's done over there. I mean, they're 6th in the nation in scoring. They're the top rushing offense in the country. You've got just dynamic offensive players. You've got Quentin Cooley, who's grading. His overall and rush grades are identical to Jonathan Brooks, just having a nuts year. Caden Salter is a dynamic runner. He's 3rd in the country in big-time throw rate. He's number 1 in average depth of target. He's kind of like, sounds funny, but he's kind of like group of 5 Jalen Milroe. It's kind of that thing. And then you put it all together, and he's the best play-action passer in the country, too. You put all of this together in Chadwell's offense. It looks a little different than at Coastal Carolina because he's got more dynamic athletes at Liberty. But this is like cracked-out triple option football, man. This is – I can see why they went 12-0 in Conference US in this conference, because they give you so many different looks, and with and he had some good athletes at Coastal, way better athletes. The speed on this team, especially at quarterback and with Quentin Cooley at running back, is really, really tough to contend with. And you know, at New Mexico State, you've got a guy in Diego Pavia at quarterback who can do a ton of things. You got a cannon for an arm. You know, this is a team also that's 12th in the nation in rush yards. You got 2 offenses that are dynamic, but it starts in the run game with both of them, especially the quarterback run game. I mean, you got some serious ball carriers on both of these teams, and this could get, it's not like an air show, but it could be a high-scoring ground attack on both sides.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Liberty runs the ball on like 62% of their plays this year. I mean, you mentioned that triple option offense that Jamie Chadwell brought over from Coastal Carolina, where Grayson McCall was one of the best quarterbacks in the country in that offense, honestly. And Caden Salter is looking like that as well. He looks like one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks this year. I mean, he's been phenomenal for them in that offense, you know, as a dual threat quarterback. And, you know, obviously Liberty, no stranger to dual threat quarterbacks. They had Malik Willis just a couple of years ago. Caden Salter, I'm not saying he's going to be maybe an NFL starter like Malik Willis is, or at least an NFL, you know, 3rd round draft pick, but still been a really, really good quarterback for them, man. So right now, Liberty has the most efficient offense in the group of 5 in terms of EPA per play. New Mexico State is 4th. So 2 teams that run the ball a lot, but at the same time, they are putting up points at a premium, man. They've done a really, really good job. I think this game could be a shootout. Now, I don't know if it'll be in the 40s just because, like I said, these 2 teams really like to run the ball and obviously milk that clock. But at the same time, it could be a game in the 30s, in my opinion. So I got Liberty winning. I got 37-30 final score. I think, like I said, it could be a shootout. I trust Liberty's defense more than I trust New Mexico State's right now. But I will say, if you're a betting man, New Mexico State is +10, and the money line is +310. So I like both of those right there. So I might take New Mexico State money line and take New Mexico State against the spread, but I still think Liberty is going to win this game. And ultimately, if they win and if Tulane loses, which we'll get into in just a second, Liberty is probably your New Year's Six team out of the group of 5 right now. So it'll be a very interesting argument. But yeah, I got Liberty winning this one 37-30, my final score.
I'm going to hover around that line and go Liberty 38-27. I think they're just a little more dynamic. I look, New Mexico State, Pavia's really good. That he's one of the better dual threats in the country, but it's all centered around him. And you mentioned Liberty's defense; they lead the country with 20 interceptions. So this is not a one-sided show here. They are 12-0 for a multitude of reasons. And they beat New Mexico State, I believe, by 16 the first time around. It could be a little tighter given the stakes, but it's at Liberty. And this offense, man, I don't have a ton of answers for. And look, there weren't a ton of answers for it at Coastal, and he's got even better athletes to work with at Liberty. I'm telling you, this offense is straight up fun to watch schematically, and just the talent and the speed infused into it. It's really Jamie Chadwell. At some point, he's going to get one of those big jobs. He's unbelievable, and what he's meshing his scheme with and the talent on that team. I think 13-0 is right in front of them.
Yeah, and Syracuse could be not a big job maybe, but Syracuse could be one of those jobs that he ultimately takes at the end of the night, hopefully. So that game again, Friday night, 7 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. Obviously, a lot of us will be tuning into the Pac-12 game at 8 o'clock. But have another screen open on CBS Sports Network, because that Conference USA Championship game will be a lot of fun, and you'll want to tune into that one. So now we'll go to the Saturday games. Now the noon Saturday game on ESPN is our favorite MAC championship game. You got Miami, Ohio playing against Toledo at Ford Field, playing where the Detroit Lions play. I'm excited for this one, Dalton. It should be a much more of a defensive game than the Conference USA Championship should be.
You just mentioned it. I actually just want to know, is this the first MAC game played on a Saturday all year? But
probably, yeah.
Actually, Conference USA has been the same way. They went to the midweek model too. But no, yeah, you're right. This game's all about defense. I mean, you've got one team in Toledo who's given up just over 20 a game this season. Miami, Ohio has only given up just over 16 a game this season, which I believe is a top 10 mark in the country. This is defense, and more defense. And there's a couple other things we'll get into matchup-wise. But no, you've got a team in Toledo who on the back end is just spectacular. The best cover grade in the group of 5. Quinyon Mitchell, get to know the name. Trevor Sikkema, I believe, has him in his top 50 right now on his big board. 3rd highest graded corner in the country. 3rd in the country with 12 pass breakups. Only 1 interception. This dude is lights, along with the whole Toledo secondary. Lights out. This is an NFL corner, starting NFL corner waiting to happen with wicked ball skills. It is not easy at all to make explosive plays on Toledo. And on the other side, you got a Miami, Ohio team. Their run defense is terrific. Okay, their linebackers, Matt Salopek and Ty Wise, this pair of linebackers, all right, they're spearheading an effort. Their linebackers have the 2nd highest run defense grade in the country. Why is that big? Okay, so Miami, Ohio's big up front. Front 7's working. The run D's working, because you got a guy in Toledo, Penny Boone, 7th in the country in rush yards, 4th in explosive runs. And the first time they played this game, it was 21-17 Toledo, but they held Boone to 71 yards, which is one of I believe his 2 or 3 lowest totals of the season. Really gave themselves a chance. If you want to beat Toledo, you have to play really good up front. You have to stop the run. Penny Boone, man, he is a big physical runner. I mean, just he would just run. We talked about the angry runs like with Jonah Coleman last week. This dude is just I believe he's 240 pounds if I remember right, 6'1" and about 240. Just at friggin' thighs for days, man. I mean, he will run you over. But Miami, Ohio, they were equipped the first time to keep themselves in the game. They just need to find a way to score enough while still stopping the run. But this is going to be an ugly, run the ball defensive kind of game for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are 2 of the 7 best defenses in the group of 5 in terms of grading this year. So really defensive game. I like Toledo's offense, though. They got some stuff that I really like. That Daquan Finn, their quarterback, has been a dynamic player for them this year. You mentioned Penny Boone, who I like a lot as well. He's been a really good runner for them as well. Miami, Ohio's run defense is really good, but I'm picking Toledo only because I like Toledo's offense more than Miami of Ohio. I think there's more to get excited about on the Rocket side than the other side of the ball. So I got Toledo winning this one 24-20. And what's an interesting storyline, I think, for this game, Dalton, do you think if, say, Liberty loses to New Mexico State, and SMU beats Tulane. Is Toledo right now is ranked in the at least AP poll. Right now, Toledo is number 23, SMU is number 25. Do you think SMU leapfrogs Toledo and gets the New Year's Six invite, or do you think that Toledo would be the New Year's Six team out of Group of 5?
Might be another eye test one. But me personally, I would probably lean on SMU if they go at Tulane and win. I would probably lean SMU, but I could totally see the argument either way. Toledo's got a really good football team.
They do. Yeah, right now they're the third highest ranked Group of 5 team after Tulane and Liberty right now. Toledo 23 in the AP poll. We'll see what happens in the college football playoff rankings. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, the Rockets certainly aren't out of the New Year's Six conversation just yet, which would be an unbelievable thing for their program. So Jason Candle, another coach Syracuse should be looking at, and maybe not go to the FCS route, or maybe not go to the position coach route. Look at Jason Candle, please, because he's been doing a terrific job with the Rockets. So I got 24-20. Who do you ultimately think is going to win the MAC championship?
I like Toledo also. I think, again, tight defensive game, but I think Penny Boone finds a little more than 71 yards this time around and is a little more reliable going on there with Toledo's offense. I'm with you. I'm going to go 24-16 Toledo.
Yeah, just look at Miami, Ohio's receiving core, man. I mean, really, their good receiver is their slot receiver, Gage Larvadain, this season, who's been solid, but the rest of them, I think, are all of them being below a 60 right now, including their tight end. So, I don't see this being a win for Miami, Ohio with that offense against that secondary in Toledo, like you mentioned, man. Quinyon Mitchell, not only one of the highest graded corners this year, he was the highest graded corner in the country last year too. And now, like you mentioned, Trevor Sikkema recently was able to watch him. He has him top 50 in the NFL draft. So he could be an early second-round pick. So, yes, this is an NFL corner you're going to see on Saturday, which is really, really cool. So we both got Toledo in the MAC championship. The next game that we're going to talk about is the Mountain West Championship, which is at 3 o'clock p.m. on Fox. You got Boise State going against UNLV. Now, it's not a home game for UNLV technically, but the game will be played in Las Vegas, Nevada, in Allegiant Stadium, the home of the Las Vegas Raiders. So kind of home game for UNLV in that respect. But it should be a fun Mountain West Championship we got here, Dalton.
Yeah, and it's what the computer gave us, right? It's just the computer spits out the 2 at a 3-way tiebreaker, and this is what it gave us. I believe San Jose State got left out. I believe it was, but no, which you've got here. This is kind of a weird one. You got two teams who've been up and down this year. Boise State won their last 3 games after starting out most of their year kind of up and down. The big thing with both of these teams, I think, is you've got offenses really carried by one superstar, right?
Yeah.
And with Boise State, they don't do a whole lot else great. They run and run and run with Ashton Ginty until the wheels fall off. And the games where the wheels don't fall off, they win. And if you have to stop Ashton Ginty's third in overall grading among all running backs, 63 missed tackles forced, 7th in the country. Is another one. There's a lot of, I noticed in these games, it's like a ton of teams with awesome running backs, and Boise's no exception. They do the same old Boise thing. They get in the eye, they run downhill, and Ginty gets them 5 yards at a time, and if they can play good enough defense to win ball games, cool. And a guy to highlight for UNLV is their leading receiver, Ricky White. He's got over 1,300 yards, 4th in the country in receiving grade, 5 straight games with 110 yards. I hadn't watched a lot of, I hadn't seen much UNLV this year. I flipped on the tape before the show, and immediately watching this guy, I thought of Rashee Rice. I saw the same. I saw, and now Rashee Rice is a hot name, fantasy football, Kansas City, all that stuff. I immediately thought of Rashee Rice within this guy making maybe like 4 or 5 catches on tape, because he's not the biggest guy. I think it was 6'1", 190, maybe 200. He's not the fastest guy. You can see it. I'll bet he runs somewhere in the low to mid 4.5, honestly. Competitive as all hell. Excellent route runner. Excellent feel for zone coverage, and makes contested catches. Just fights for the football. I see a lot of this guy. He's going to be a fun one. Whenever he comes out of like that, one of those guys, we see every year receivers rounds like 4, 5, and 6. Some of them just weren't found for some reason. He's going to be one of those. I don't think he'd be like a superstar, but I'm telling you, I just saw Rashee Rice, all the same tape that I watched last year of SMU, looking at Rashee Rice, and then he went to the Chiefs. I was like, oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. Same kind of guy, just solid, just a solid. Certain receivers, especially, are just competitors. You can see it in the play style, and this guy's one of them. When in doubt, throw it to Ricky White, and good things happen, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it. Ricky White, and then you mentioned Ashton GT. Like that's the only guy, not only guy, but that's the one guy you need to stop on this Bronco offense is Ashton GT because he's been a phenomenal player. I think he was the highest graded true freshman last season. He's again putting up elite grades this year as a true sophomore. He should be one of the top running backs, honestly, heading into next year as well. But yeah, that's the one guy I think you really need to key in on if you're UNLV. And these are two teams with kind of below average defenses right now. So it should be an interesting game. I actually do think UNLV is going to end up winning this game, though. I know that Boise State is favored right now by, I think, 3 points. I got UNLV winning 30-27, essentially a home game for them. Also, I think they have a better quarterback in Jaden Maiava. And Boise State, remember, is on an interim coach right now after firing their coach, Andy Avalos, a couple weeks ago. So all those factors, to me, in a close game, I point to UNLV in my opinion. So I'm taking the Rebels in this one.
This is a hard one. This is a hard one because you've got the pseudo home game. You've got Boise's hot though, man. They've won their last 3. They've looked really, really good lately. The grading on these two teams is very similar. They're like right next to each other when you look at all of it. Yeah, man, this is a hard one. I think I'm going to go with Boise. I'm going to go with Ginty. I think they play the safer game. I think they've been playing better defense lately. I'm going to take Boise 27-23. But this is going to be tight. This actually, of the 5, I think for me this is the hardest game to pick of the 5. You have two teams that like definitely are not great, and definitely aren't bad, and have just kind of different. UNLV, sometimes I watch their offense when it's not Ricky White making an explosive play. Sometimes I'm not sure what they're trying to do. So I'll take the safer, like Boise with the identity playing. They're hot lately. I'll take Boise.
All right. So you're taking Boise. I'm taking UNLV. Next one we're talking about probably is the biggest stakes in terms of who makes the nearest 6 bowl. That is the American Athletic Championship game between SMU and Tulane at Tulane. So the home game for the Green Wave. And Dalton, you kind of broke the news to me before the show because I actually didn't see this before, but Preston Stone, SMU's starting quarterback, not only starting quarterback, star quarterback, the highest graded group of 5 quarterback this season, is out with a broken leg now. So now SMU on a backup quarterback against Tulane. How do you kind of see this one playing out?
This is awful because I'm going to highlight some of the quick things Stone and SMU have accomplished. Okay, they're the highest graded group of 5 team. They're the 6th highest graded team in the country. Yep. They score the same points per game as USC, and they allow fewer points than Alabama. All right, Preston Stone since week 9. All right, 5 games, 95.3 passing grade, best in the country, better than Jaden Daniels. All right, they were raging hot. And last one, and this might be the one thing that gives them a chance without Stone. Only 4 teams in the country are in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive grading, Max. Michigan, Alabama, Notre Dame, and SMU.
Wow.
All right. So they are doing with this with some balance. And some people go, they got 2 losses. Well, the 2 losses were at Oklahoma and at TCU very early in the year. Once they got in conference play, they just started blasting almost everybody. They put 52 points up in a half again this past week against Navy. Just unbelievable. And Stone got hurt with about 5-6 minutes left in the second quarter. I mean, they were just absolutely rolling. And now it's a mystery. Now, can they go in there with Kevin Jennings now, who's got 46 career pass attempts, is going to start. He's played sparingly when they've been up by 50 in some of these games this year. But that's a tough environment to go in for your, I believe, what'll be his first career start against a team that's really experienced, been here before. Tulane won a huge game last week against UTSA, forced 5 turnovers in that game. And for Tulane, a guy that we didn't get to highlight this week as we were kind of catching up with them and Michael Pratt and what's going on there. How about Mekhi Hughes, man? In a game where Michael Pratt only went 9 for 22, and they were forcing turnovers and playing complimentary football. He had 166 yards against UTSA last week, and he's got 100-plus yards in 7 of his last 8 games. Tulane, pardon me, I don't know if he's as good as Tyjae Spears, but it's kind of getting to be the same sort of thing where Spears last year, for as great as Pratt was, and he was spectacular against USC, Tyjae Spears last year was the engine of this offense, and it's starting to look like Mekhi Hughes is actually the difference. When they can be two-dimensional and take some of the heat off of Pratt, they can win games like that. So you've got some weird dynamics going in this game, but boy, this task for SMU is going to be rough without Stone, because he was playing as good as any quarterback in the country.
Oh, dude, he was. And then I'll just spoil it right now. I picked SMU to win this game before I knew about Preston Stone, because I thought SMU, you look at the entire team. I mean, offensively, they've been one of the most efficient offenses in the group of 5 this year. Defensively, they've been arguably maybe the best defense in the group of 5 this year. I mean, they have been phenomenal on both sides of the ball. In fact, you look at that defense, they're the only group of 5 defense. I'm checking to see if they're the only defense in the country. They have 90-plus grades in run defense, pass rushing, and coverage. All 3 aspects of defense, they're grading above a 90 in. They're the only group of 5 team that has done that. I'm checking right now to see if they're the only FBS team that's done that as well. But yeah, man, SMU has been a phenomenal team all year that I don't think has gotten enough credit. They're finally ranked now. Right now, so I'm looking right now. So it is Michigan has done it before. Penn State has 90-plus grades in all aspects. And UCLA has 90-plus grades in all aspects. And then SMU has 90-plus grades in all aspects as well. So those are the only ones, man. Those are some elite defenses that you're looking at right there.
Yeah.
So that's an impressive feat. So I really think SMU's defense could keep them in this game. But now you're in a backup quarterback right now going against Tulane, who, like you said, is really good at both running and passing with Michael Pratt as their quarterback, obviously. So it sucks. I really wanted to pick SMU, partly because I do think SMU would have beaten Tulane with Preston Stone, and also partly because I want to see the Liberty Flames get in with a 13-0 record. But I do think Tulane now against SMU as a backup quarterback, I got Tulane winning this game. I'll go close because I think it will be a low-scoring-ish game, but I'll go 27-24. I think Tulane is going to pull it out on top.
This is tough. It's a tough team to make your first start against. It's a tough environment to make your first start in. That going down there to Tulane and winning games is not easy. And I think Michael Pratt will be better than last week. Mekhi Hughes is a big factor too. SMU, I think stopping the run is going to be big time here. Again, Hughes has 100 yards in 7 of his last 8 games. I'm going to take Tulane also. I'm with you. I was with Stone in there. I was going to take SMU. I'm with you. I thought they were one of the hottest teams in the country, but no, they can stay in this. I think a lower scoring game will help them here. If they go in and give up 35 points, I'm not seeing it. I can't trust it. It's nothing against Kevin Jennings. We just don't know anything about him. He's thrown 46 passes. So
yeah,
Tulane. I'm gonna say 31-17. I think the moment's a little big, but I think SMU. Well, they're going to the ACC next year. Is that right? Is that next year?
Yes. Yeah.
That's going to be fun. With Stone healthy, they're saying he'll be. I think Lashley said that he'll be good for spring ball. I think back on a field by March. That's going to be a fun one with the way that with as good as their offense is and him coming back. That'll be a fun one seeing them in the ACC.
Yeah, Lashley just signed a contract extension as well. That would have been another guy I would have wanted Syracuse to make a run at, but he's staying in SMU for the time being, and obviously joining the same conference as Syracuse as well. Do not blame him at all for staying there, because they're building something pretty cool down there in SMU. Especially with Preston Stone coming back, man. Now they're in the Power 5 conference next year. It's going to be very, very exciting to be an SMU fan, honestly. So the last Group of 5 championship game we're talking about is the Sun Belt Championship, which is Appalachian State at Troy, and it's a damn shame, Dalton, that we're not getting the James Madison Dukes in this game, but that's beside the point. What are you looking forward to seeing in this Troy App State game?
Well, something we haven't mentioned yet, too. I just want to throw in there. Congrats, too, to James Madison and Jacksonville State for their, I guess other teams' failures, allowing them to at least play in bowl games, because that's well deserved. There's no reason they shouldn't be playing at all. So we'll see what bowls they get in. Should be a lot of fun with those two. First thing, Troy, they run. They stop the run. Kamani Vidal, I've had him in a game or two in the past. Really darn good. 5th in the country. in rushing yards, third in the country in forced missed tackles.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always block the greatest for him. Their run blocking grades are not spectacular. He makes a lot of things happen. When he gets rolling, I believe he had a game with 240 yards this year on the ground. If they want to run, they want to get the play action. Gunnar Watson with a 90+ play action grade.
Yep.
That's just how their offense works. And we don't have Dave's trivia today, but I have one. I have one for you. Okay, you've got two big guys in the middle. Okay, now we get to stop in the run for Troy. T.J. Jackson and Buda Jones, big defensive tackles in the middle, both in the top 10 in run defense grades in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Max, Troy is second in the country in run defense grade from their defensive tackles. Who's the only team ahead of them?
It's got to be Texas, right, with Sweat and Murphy? No.
It's not. They were fifth. They're best overall. They're the best overall because of the pass rush, but they're fifth. They were fifth. I knew you were going to ask me that too about Texas. It's not Texas.
I would have assumed it. Yeah.
The only team ahead of Troy in run defense grades from their D tackles. What do you think?
Dude, it's not Texas. Is it Notre Dame with Cross and who's the other guy? I'm blanking on him right now. It's not Notre Dame either. It's Cross and someone else. They have another stud detail. I'm blanking on it right now. It's bad. But
yeah.
Oh man, it's not them. I don't know. Who is it then?
It is Clemson.
Wow.
Clemson, okay. I believe, is Tyler Davis and company in the middle
and, for Clemson. Ruka Aurora was still there. I think, too. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, that's how just to throw it in there with those teams you mentioned and only being behind Clemson. T.J. Jackson and Buda Jones, the headline.
Insane, man.
This is a brick wall stopping the run. This team, Troy, they got an identity. They run, they stop the run, they play good defense, they got play action passing. It's really, really efficient. And so I'm looking at they low key. They've been playing really good football all year. I would have loved to have seen them against James Madison, but you got App State now who's blazing hot. They went into James Madison and won when College Game Day was there and everything. They started 3-4. Now they've won their last 5. They've kind of figured some things out. Their offensive line's playing better. The defense playing a little better the second half of the season. So it's going to be a fun one. But that's I look at Troy running and stopping the run against an App State defense that's 112th in the country in run D grade. Could be a matchup problem. They really need Joey Aguilar to have a big game, I think, to get by this Troy front seven.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, and you look at PFS power rankings right now, which is not resume at all, nothing like that. It's just purely, who would be rated highest and who would be favored, I guess, on a neutral field is a good way to look at it. Right now in the PFS power rankings, the highest ranked group of 5 team isn't Tulane, isn't Liberty, isn't Toledo, SMU, or anything like that. It's actually Troy. Troy is number 15 in PFS power rankings, which I don't know if I quite agree with that, but still, man, that's insane that they are that high.
Surprised. I'm surprised that's not SMU. I would think because I've seen
all the grading.
I've seen some other metrics with SM, but I'm telling you, they do a lot of stable things really well. But stop the run, their defense is spectacular. I'm telling you, some of these defenses, especially in the Sun Belt, especially Troy and James Madison, those two, those are elite defenses, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, look at Troy, Gunnar Watson, you mentioned, Kamani Vidal. They're both among the best at their positions in the group of 5 this year. Also, Troy has a really good receiving core as well, even after losing Tez Johnson to Oregon, and a solid defense at Troy as well with a decent coverage, I believe. So it kind of spells trouble for App State. App State, of course, 8th in EPA per play this year on offense, but Troy is 3rd in the defensively in terms of EPA play in the group of 5. So I really like Troy this year, man. I think they're a really good team that not a lot of people are talking about. I don't know if they should be ranked right now, but they are certainly a team that's forced to be reckoned with in the group of 5. I think the Trojans might run away with this one. I got them winning 33-21 over App State in this one.
I think there's 2 styles of games. This could go any which way, and I like Troy in this game. I think they've got the more stable things, but I'm gonna go a little tighter. I'm gonna go 31-28. I think the big thing for me with App State, they're hot lately. They've won 5 in a row, but Joey Aguilar, the only thing with him, 28 big time throws is 6th in the country, but 25 turnover worthy plays is 3rd.
Yeah.
So you don't know any given play which Joey Aguilar throw that you're going to get. And Troy plays They play a much safer brand of football. I could see a road for App State winning this game. If this gets to be a shootout, I would take App State, but I'll take Troy. I think Kamani Vidal is the best player on the field at tailback for Troy. And I think App State, they're going to have to throw the ball over the top because I'm not too sure how you run for a whole lot of yards on this Troy defense. And you know what Troy is going to be, Max? They're going to be the team that everyone discovers in a bowl game. When they get to, if they get to play, especially if they get to play like I don't know, somebody with a little bit bigger name value or whatever, they're going to be, wow, this team's pretty darn good. Like it's not the flashiest brand of football, but they get it done. They just do the really solid fundamental things well. They're really physical. And I think that more just stable, consistent brand of play as opposed to sometimes App State's kind of up and down is what will get them through this game. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, Kamani Vidal's a junior. He might go back, obviously. Gunnar Watson, I got to check on him too. But, dude, we're going to do our way too early top 25 after the national championship's over and all that. And that'll be something I'm really excited to do with you. Gunnar Watson's a senior. He might have eligibility left. We'll see. But if both those guys go back, man, this might be the group of 5 team that we rank, honestly, in the way too early top 25. I really like what Troy has got going with John Summerall there as head coach as well. So both of us taking Troy in this one. All right, Dalton, before we go, and we only have we have 8 minutes left in the Zoom call, and we're recording this on Zoom, by the way, for all you not knowing at home. But there's one breaking news story I want to give out to you right now to get our reactions on this.
Right now,
Will Howard is in the transfer portal. Kansas State quarterback Will Howard just entered the transfer portal. What do you think about that? And do you think he would be one of the top guys in the portal this year then?
I think he'd be up there. Wow, that is a big one. I'm trying to think of like what are the fits.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
I'll have to think more on this. This will be a fun one. At some point, what we'll have to do is go through like who are the top 20 guys in the portal. I know.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna do that.
We usually get a written list on the website. Wow, that's a weird one. No, he'll be
right. Like Kansas State, I feel like that's a lifer there. I don't
know. He'll be sought after for sure. He's a dual threat. He's experienced. He's got big game experience, and there's been, he won the Big 12 last year, right?
Yeah.
And he played his absolute heart out. Oh my God. And even against Texas this year, man. There are times when Will Howard shows you a lot. It's just a matter of consistency outside of play action. I don't know what that decision could be based on, or if they have told him, hey, we're going to go with Avery Johnson next year. Cause that's the very clear signal. That maybe they said to him, look, Will, especially I believe they lost to Iowa State the snow the other night.
Yeah.
Maybe they told him like, hey, we're going to start getting this thing going with Avery. Avery Johnson showed flashes. He's a better athlete than Howard. If he's not a better passer yet, but he's a better athlete. And maybe we've talked about Colin Klein as their offensive coordinator trying to get to make
sense.
Make the offense look more like Colin Klein, right? And I've told you that with Avery Johnson, that if he gets in the weight room, he could look a lot like that. But no, that's an interesting name because I think especially you never know, it's either teams that are trying to find that guy or like in the Power 5, or even there's always a couple of names every year in the group of 5 that they come from Power 5 schools. That wouldn't shock me either if you saw Will Howard arrive at a bigger group of 5 school and have like a lot of success down there. I don't. That's a funky one. That's not one that I saw coming.
No, not at all. Dude, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a big Power 5 school that goes out. You think about how all the quarterbacks that are leaving this year. You got Caleb Williams leaving. You got Bo Nix leaving. You got Michael Penix Jr., Drake May obviously leaving as well.
Is Uiagalelei leaving? Is he a senior?
He might be out of eligibility now. He was a 2019 guy, so he actually might have another year. Or does he have another year? I think he might have another year. So he might transfer because Oregon State obviously now.
You know what I wonder too with Will Howard, like these teams that have just hired new coaches who maybe would just bring him in as opposed to waiting on whatever they're recruiting or dealing. Like, what if
Michigan State?
How much it's a different system than he's used to, but how much would Jeff Lebby trust him?
Yeah.
At Mississippi State. I don't think that's a terrible,
because Will Rogers is in the transfer portal as well. So yeah.
And I think Howard's got a ton of experience, big game experience, and he's at times shown to be a hot and cold passer. But maybe Jeff Lebby, after seeing him at Kansas State across the field, goes, maybe that's a guy I want to start with at Mississippi State and then go from there. That's one I think about too. Is I go, who amongst these new coaches might want this guy? That's an interesting one because he's a very good player. He's not. I don't think he's an elite player, but he's definitely at least like a B+ guy that you could start something up with for sure.
And dude, Michigan State, I mean, look at Caden Hauser. I think he's the second lowest graded Power 5 quarterback this year. They obviously need an upgraded quarterback. And you mentioned before how we're trying to get to the smash mouth mentality. Well, Will Howard's a great play action passer. If you're getting to the smash mouth run game at Michigan State again, Will Howard would be a really good complementary quarterback there as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State is one of the top schools really going after him as well. But
I'll give you one more. Just because I don't know what they have waiting in the wings. What about North Carolina?
Yeah. I don't believe they have anyone coming in. No, I don't believe they have any like big recruits or anything like that either. So yeah, I mean that would make a lot of sense too.
Because are they still gonna have Hampton next year?
Yes, they will. He's only a true sophomore.
They can make that work.
Yeah,
North Carolina. I'm just thinking of where because he's a good football player. I won't lie to you. He's a dual threat, can do something. No, that's gonna be a fun one to watch. Definitely.
Yeah. So we're obviously, once all this settles down, we're going to be covering the transfer portal in depth. Trust us, because there's a lot to obviously cover with the transfer portal. But yeah, I just want to get a quick thoughts on that one because Will Howard, big name entering the transfer portal right there. Going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the portal as well. We'll see who else enters the portal. I mean, I don't know about you, Dalton. I've got notifications on for a lot of reporters, and I'm getting one every 5 minutes about a new player that just entered the portal. So should be a wild time. Should be a wild weekend of college football. You got conference championship weekend. This is it before the college football playoff now. We just went over, obviously, all the head coach hirings and firings. It's silly season in the transfer portal, silly season in terms of coaching as well. And then, of course, went over all the scenarios for every team to make the college football playoff. And we're going to find out who the Final Four is after this week. So for Dalton Wasserman, for producer Eli, I'm Max Chadwick, and we'll see you guys on Wednesday for our Power 5 Conference Championship preview, where we go over who we think will win all 5 Power 5 Conference Championship games. So we'll see you guys next time.